Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Hope you guys are doing well. It's Sunday. I'm hoping you guys have enjoyed your weekend. Mine was exciting. I'll use the word exciting. Mr. General Eaton, welcome in, good sir. So, it's been an interesting weekend. A lot of different narratives coming up. A lot of issues people are having surrounding a lot of things. And so we'll get down into the core of those. I got some feedback coming in. Nah, it's fine. All right. But nonetheless, so if you guys haven't already shared this out, I would appreciate if you guys would help out. If you guys don't want to, I understand. It's okay. Lynn, welcome in. Jim and Jack, thank you. Maureen, Ray K, thank you guys for joining in. So, let's get started. I am Mr. America, the Bearded Truth. Jason Lynn, thank you guys for joining in. We got move the mic around a little bit. I think I got the sound setting set up for you guys now, so it'll be a little more crisp and clean for you, if you will. Maybe a little bit quieter, though, nonetheless. So I want to cover really three big topics, right? Right now, a lot of, Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, somebody that I've spoken about a couple times on the show, she has officially put her hat into the ring for 2020. And this has stirred up a lot of controversy around her. A lot of old things are coming up about her, and a lot of just general misinformation about her. So we'll cover her, and we'll talk about that whole situation. Also want to talk about the government shutdown. There's a lot of people putting different narratives, putting different aspects out there. So we'll muddy through those murky waters and get to the end of those. And then also want to talk about Representative Steve King. Steve King has said something that the line that is being projected around him, I think was really poorly worded. And so because of that, people were calling him a white nationalist, a white supremacist, nationalist, etc., etc. And so we'll get into that as well. We'll try to clean up the waters a little bit, try to get through the misinformation. And then if we have time, we'll also talk a little bit about Tucker Carlson. I always get his name mixed up, right? I always want to call him Carl Tuckerson, but Tucker Carlson. So we'll talk about him. He's got some views against capitalism, and so we'll figure that out, and we'll come through it on our own. But let's start with Tulsi, good old Tulsi. So in the past, when we've brought up Tulsi, the reason why I've brought her up in the past is because she's been anti-war. She is a veteran of the United States military, and one of the things that she's always been in favor of was ending a lot of the conflicts that the military has been involved with. She's in favor of helping out the veterans, helping out with veteran care after they've done their service to the country. So she's good on that. She's also strong when it comes to prison reform, right? Getting rid of the idea of working against the war on drugs, right? Getting more people out of the prison population that maybe aren't necessarily warranting serving time for the charges levied against them. So she's good on those aspects, but Tulsi Gabbard, she is a Bernie bro, effectively, right? She is somebody that is a much larger government than her own. She is somebody that believes in Medicare for all. She believes in a lot of ways. She believes in expanding out the federal government from where it is right now to a much higher level. Comment was, you think that veterans should be anti-war? Yeah, I mean, a lot of veterans, especially right now, are coming out of the service and they're becoming much stronger on libertarian values, or they're staying to the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, but they are definitely on the anti-war side. And it's interesting, right? When you're in a war for 18, 19 years, that's one of the outcomes that you should be expecting, and certainly we are getting that. So So Tulsi Gabbard, she's definitely a left wing on a lot of things, but she's viewed as a Democratic moderate. I think she really is the only one within the Democratic Party that is in favor of ending a lot of these wars, ending a lot of these conflicts. And so on that, I've got to give her props. But when it comes to the actual services provided by the government, she definitely wants to expand it out. This has caused a lot of people in the conservative movement, a lot of Republicans and everything else, to fret about her and to worry about how she's going to be utilized. And I want to, as somebody who watches a little more of the Democratic Party and their internal workings, I want to say that there really is no fear that Tulsi Gabbard will be getting a lot of support from the DNC or from Democratic members of Congress, right? She is anti-establishment Democrat. She is against that. And just like what we saw with Bernie Sanders, where Bernie Sanders didn't get support from the establishment and kind of got pushed out, and he was a fringe group, the same thing will happen with Tulsi. She's not going to get the support, especially because she's anti-war. Right? If you guys remember back just what was it, like a month ago now? Seems like 1,000 news cycles. But about a month ago, President Donald Trump wanted to pull out from Syria. And he wanted to pull out some troops from Afghanistan. And that was enough to rile up the mainstream media, the Democratic Party, as well as, of course, some of our neoconservatives here on the conservative side of the aisle as well. So if everybody's against that, there's no way that Tulsi Gabbard is going to be getting a lot of support on those grounds, because she's anti-establishment. She's putting herself at a much higher or much steeper hill to climb in order to get the achievements that she wants. She might make it and get some support. She might get some actual intellectually honest people on her side. But I think that really what's going to happen is she's going to get discredited and destroyed. Her tweets are already being looked at. Her stances and flips are already being scrutinized. I don't think that we're going to be seeing her going anywhere in any appreciable way. So regardless of which side you're on, I think that we should be listening to what she's saying. We should be listening to what they're all saying, because it gives you a better view as to what the country is looking at, and the views of the people. But we can at least be objective enough and say, look, these are the parts of these candidates that I like, and these are portions of the candidate that I don't like. Be able to have these conversations. Tulsi Gabbard, I think, is not going to be getting very much support. If I were to put her on a scale, if you guys want to use my basis, and I know it's kind of a weird thing, I would not even give her a 20%. I believe her Liberty rating, I saw a depiction of her Liberty rating is somewhere in the teens, the low teens. I think it was like 13 or 14%. She's not somebody that I would be voting for in any way. And I really, really, really don't think that she's going to be getting any big movements. And so if you're a Democrat, don't worry about her. If you're a Republican, don't really worry about her. She is not in any way like the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, where she's just coming out and spurring a bunch of nonsensical bull and getting headlines from it. Any woman would have no chance of being president against Trump. Why would no woman have any chance of doing that? I'm not really sure what you mean by that. I think that any woman would have the same opportunity, the same chance against President Trump. I think that certainly it's going to be more based on the values. If you're talking about left wing, I think that the left wing would be much more in favor of electing a woman vice electing a man. So if you could provide a little more clarification on that, I would appreciate that nonetheless. So, don't let people like spur you up and bring emotion into that. There's really not much there. But I do want to transition back over to the neocons, over to conservatives, Republicans, and Democrats that are in office right now, because there's been a lot of stuff that's been coming out. There's been a lot of people throwing a lot of hate and shade out there. And right now, what we have is the government's been shut down for the longest out of any government shutdown in the history. So over the last 40 years, we started doing this precedent where the government can shut down, and the governments have been getting longer and more frequent. It's the climate change of politics, if you will, right? Everything's just gonna happen more often. It's gonna be more devastating. It's just the apocalypse. And really, it's as this becomes a bigger trend, it's a bigger calling that the government is too irresponsible to maintain this power that it has, he would destroy them. He might. They have way too much power. If they're just constantly being built up, shut down, built up, shut down, built up, shut down, and really just devastating the people. Because you can look out there, you can look out into the world, and you can see, maybe not the world, but the country, and you can look out, and people are saying, look at the federal workers that are being devastated right now by this government shutdown. Right, they're not getting their paychecks, and it's just devastating them, their families, and their way of life. And so obviously that's an issue. You have people like me that are being affected by this government shutdown. Until the government actually returns to service, I am incapable, or more accurately, my wife is incapable of making money from some of her business endeavors, right? It's not a matter of the government is in any way involved with these, other than the fact that the government won't allow us to get loans for us to get paid. So there's that aspect of it, right? And that's getting onto the grounds of them just being too big and too overbearing. When it comes to the actual pragmatic side of things, if you have two sides of the aisle and they're like, hey, we don't really know how to come to an agreement on this stuff, we don't know how we're going to fund these things, what's the actual correct dollar amount, what laws we're going to throw into this, then we're putting ourselves into effectively a hostage situation. And to where you have departments of the government that are being held hostage against the people's will, in order to be used for a pawn piece. Now, remembering back to 2013, that was Affordable Care Act funding. Now we have the wall. And so it's just this grotesque thing where you're able to hold parts of the government hostage in order to get other parts of the government funded, worked in, accepted, whatever you want to call it. And I think that this is truly a grotesque use of force, whichever way it goes. I'm sitting here right now, and I had actually, let me pull that one up. I have something that's going to. I had a picture that I stole from somebody, and I'll be honest, right? I stole this meme from somebody. Nobody's put their name on it, so it's not really intellectual property yet. But nonetheless, I stole this, and it's going a little bit viral right now. And it's just there's a bigger issue. Well, not a bigger issue. There's an issue within the discussion of this government shutdown that it really needs to have some light shed on it. And it's the idea that federal employees are paying their taxes in order to make sure that they have their return of a guarantee of a job, right? That's how they guarantee their job, is by paying the taxes. And there's this gross conceptual error within this, right? And it's something that maybe you guys aren't getting involved with these conversations, and it's probably because I'm on the crazy fringe groups of Facebook, if you will. But I wanted to point something out. And this happens a lot when you talk to people that are on Social Security. This happens a lot to, people when they're just involved in any way with the government. When the government's providing you with money and then you're getting your taxes taken out of it, you feel like you're adding into it. And really, you're not. I'm sorry to say it. If you're a worker, if you're a Social Security recipient, if you're getting money given to you and they're taxing it out of it, that money is not money that's being added to the pot. It's money that's being returned to the pot. And so you don't really get a lay claim to that, just the same way that I don't get a lay claim for the goodwill or the compassion that is done with the money that's taken from me. I don't get to take credit for that, and neither do federal employees for the revenue made off of this. And there was a good analogy with this. So imagine you walk up and you dive your hand into a pocket of a pot where people are donating money. You take 100% of the money out, right? And then you take 30% and you throw it back in there. You don't get to say that 30%, I gave you that 30%. It's a good time, right? I gave you that 30%. You guys can thank me later. Don't worry. Not a problem, right? Because you still took 70%. It wasn't. You see where the logistical fallacy there is, and this is an issue. What, no Trump today? We'll get to Trump in a little bit. And so you don't get to take that 70% of the money and then go with the remaining 30, be like, here you go. This is because I'm a good person. I get credit for that. No, because the 70% you still stole, and that 70% is by a government ran agency, and the government really is effectively a legalized mafia. So they come in and they say, give me your money, and if you don't give me the money, then we're gonna do some harm to you. So your ideology is, I'm gonna give them the money so that they don't do the things to me if I didn't give them the money. And so they use the extortion tactics in order to get your money from you. So obviously there's a wrongdoing there. But when it comes to a federal employee versus a private sector employee, what we've seen in the past is, or even right now, that federal employees compared to their counterparts not only have higher wages on average, but they also have better benefits. So they'll have better medical, better dental, better retirement, better just better entitlements all around to them, or better benefits for them all around. And so it gets to a point where when these shutdowns happen, people say, woe is me, or woe is them. We got to care about them and we got to love them. And you gotta accept that that's just not good. That's just not right. Because they're getting a better life than our private sector people are. And then even when they're going through the normative trend, the trend that's been happening for the last 40 years, where the government shuts down for a little while, everyone gets back pay. You don't get to say, they didn't make this decision. You made the decision by working for a company that has this trend, so you can't expect me to feel sympathy. So if you're a federal employee and this is one of your arguments, what I would recommend for you is that once the government comes back up and you decide, hey, I've got paychecks coming in, don't go and blow that paycheck on buying a new TV. Don't go and spend your tax dollars, your tax refund, right? Which is just another silly thing. Because you're getting a refund from the taxes from the people. Anyways, don't take that and go and blow it on yourself. Put that into your bank account. Put that into a savings account. Put it in something where you're not going to touch it, and have 1 month of payment in there, 1 month of income stowed away, and keep it in there for the time in which this happens again. Take care of yourself. Be smart. Take care of your family, your wife, your kids, whoever it is. Take care of yourself by putting it away for the future, because the government's not smart enough. They're not responsible enough, and at the end of the day, they don't care enough about you. So you got to care about yourself. So if you're working for the federal government, take care of yourself. Put 1 month's income away. If you can get a second one in there, put a second one in there. But take care of yourself, because I'm genuinely tired of people crying for you. You made the decision for working for the government. You can handle it whenever it shuts down for 1 week, 2 weeks, or even 3 weeks. You can figure out a way. If it comes down to it, and it's closed for 4 weeks or 5 weeks, right? You got to get prepared to be able to go back to a private sector. If somebody is in the private sector and their business says, hey, you're not going to get a paycheck this week, you're not getting a paycheck this month, then if you're not going to get these paychecks, you go and you look for a new job. I understand that the government itself is a guaranteed entity. It's something that is there all the time, but your paycheck is not guaranteed. And so you have to be able to prepare to take care of yourself. And when something like a trend comes along, you have to be able to be prepared for that. If you have unexpected events, you still have to be prepared. We all have to be adults, regardless of who your direct employer is. So I'm genuinely tired of that argument. So, but nonetheless, we can move on from that portion of the government shutdown. Now, as for the actual inner workings of the government shutdown, what we've seen is the House is still continuing to throw bills like crazy at the Senate and at the President in attempts to get the government brought back up without funding the wall in accordance with what President Trump has said will be acceptable, right? The $5.7 billion. And so while we're waiting for the House to comply, Every time they throw up a bill, there's people across this country that don't really follow politics enough, and they say, "Yay, we're going to have the government come back," and the Senate says, specifically Mitch McConnell, saying, "Look, I made a promise to the president. If he would not be willing to sign it, I'm not going to put him in the position to sign it. I'm not going to allow these bills come to a vote." And so he's been upholding his side of this argument, and that's been getting people riled up and upset. So the Democrats are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that is trying to get the blame pushed back onto the president and the Republican Party. So they're being effective on that, but they're not making any grounds in the background. They're not making any movement there, because they don't want to in any way provide Trump with what he was wanting, even though, Trump was even saying it during his address from the Oval Office. And you have plenty of conservative pundits that have taken the tapes of the prestigious leaders of the left, Obama, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton, all of them, that are advocating and endorsing building a barrier, building a wall, and everything else in order to push back against illegal immigration. They're taking that and they've distributed that out to show that they're hypocrites. But it really does come down to the Democrats don't want the Republicans to win, and the Republicans don't want the Democrats to win. This goes back to the notion that I've hit you guys with 1,001 times. That is that both parties are not there for you. They're not there for you. They're there for themselves. They're there to protect their own party interests. They're there to ensure that in 2020 they get more votes. In 2022 they get more votes. In 2024 they get more votes. They don't care enough about us, the people. So, so a huge fundamental issue there, of course. But you also have even some Republicans, right? You have the great... pardon me. You have the great Lindsey Graham from my state, South Carolina. He's even saying, "Look, Mr. President, we need to bring back the government, and then once we bring back the government, we'll talk about the wall afterwards, and it'll go through." He does have the short-sighted view because Lindsey Graham, I don't know what's up his sleeve, what he wants to do, but Lindsey Graham has a lot more faith in the Democrats than most Republicans do, and certainly more than I do, and it's a huge issue. But so you even have some Republicans wanting to go across the party lines to make it open, and I can understand the core value of wanting to bring back the unity and saying, "Hey, look, we're going to work with you, but you guys work with us." But I think that it comes down to when it's those two big wings of the same bird, which wing flaps first doesn't mean that the other wing will flap second, right? It never means that. So there's some short-sightedness there with Lindsey Graham. And everyone who's advocating for this, everyone who's saying, let's open up the government and let's let it go through. My idea, a thought that I've had, and certainly I was reading the Calvin Coolidge biography that I was reading to you guys earlier, is the pocket veto, the age-old pocket veto. So I want to go into that. So one thing that we understand from the Constitution is that the House passes a bill, the Senate passes a bill, and then the President can accept a bill or veto a bill. That's all that we know, right? We don't have a time limit set on these. So it doesn't say within 30 days, within 90 days, within the term, within the year, right? That these must be done. This has been actually a big way to kill bills without voting on them, right? Let's say there's something that's going to pass that you don't necessarily want to pass, and you're a member of the Senate or a member of the House. What you do is you don't bring it up, and you throw in 100 more bills, you throw in 1,000 more bills if you have to, just to make sure that there's not enough time there. And so once the year elapses, once that year's over, right, and you come in for the new session of the Congress, then that bill is now no longer there, right? You have to go through the entire process again. They can do the same thing at the president's level. So at the presidential level, they can do what's called a pocket veto. You take that bill, you put it in your pocket, and you walk away. That is something that can be done. So without a veto, the House and the Senate can't override it. So they're stuck in their process. Now this is where things get hairy. This is where discussions of impeachment can come up. This is where, he's just keeping the government shut down. Yada yada yada. Have a good one, Aspen. There's going to be a lot of issues there, but you can already imagine the hysteria that would be brought about with that, and so I don't think that would necessarily be the best move, but it is one of the moves that are possible if Mitch McConnell himself doesn't maintain his promise and actually brings bills to the president that he does not want to sign, and so that'll bring up a whole flurry of the mainstream media, of the Democrats, and of some Republicans saying, "Oh, he's not doing his job, impeach him," blah 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 blah. But if he is staunchly in favor of getting that wall at any cost, that may be what it takes. So the government shutdown, I think it'll probably come back in the next 2 weeks. Should be coming back in the next 2 weeks. I'm sure early this week we will see a big concession. My guess is there's going to be a big concession, maybe $3 billion, not enough to fund it all, coming from the House. And then once we get to that point, basically it's, hey, no, you're going to pay for the whole thing, and we're going to move on with life. And then it's gonna be another week of, oh, he just doesn't want to work with us. I'm ready for the government to be shut down, or for the government shutdown to be over. I just wish that a government shutdown, if it were to occur, would actually be larger than what it is now, and actually get to a point where not only is it being shut down, but the government is rescinding itself from the ways that it's been atrocious against the individuals here in this country. While we talk about atrocious things, Steve King got quoted by the Washington Post? No, New York Times. So the New York Times, let's go into a quick history of the New York Times. So the New York Times is in the past, they will do an interview with people, and if they aren't able to get a big juicy bite, a big juicy steak, if you will, from it, they won't air anything, right? I remember from Dave Smith's show, Part of the Problem. If you guys haven't listened to that podcast, fantastic. But he was talking about this. And the Times went to the Mises Institute and was interviewing people. And they interviewed Tom Woods. And Tom Woods is somebody who's a great orator. He's a good person to talk to learn a lot of information about. But they wouldn't air his interview. Why is that? Because if you have somebody that is against your political views, you're not going to take their stuff and portray it in a positive light. Now, the New York Times has been extremely biased in everything that they've been doing in the past. Scotter, welcome in, man. And so the New York Times doesn't want to portray off anyone in a positive way. And so I'm really interested in this part. But I want to know like the actual context of everything, but and the way that it was said, of course. But when it comes to the quote that has spurred up this controversy around Representative King was white nationalist, white supremacist, Western civilization. How did that language become offensive? Why did I sit in classes teaching me about the merits of our history and our civilization? So, yes, that quotation, that quote is absolutely 100% reprehensible. It's disgusting. It was so poorly worded that you would think that white nationalism, white supremacy is the merits of our history and of our civilization, right? Obviously, it's wrong. But when he continued on, later on in this interview, he was elaborating on this. He was basically providing his side of this, and he not only denounced white supremacy and white nationalism. He also said that the 6 million Jews were innocently killed, or that there were 6 million innocent Jews that were killed by nationalists, by Nazism, and so he was trying to, the way that he had put it out there was obviously this first part was horrible. The elaboration later therein, he says, look, I am just a nationalist. And people got spurred up over that. And he said, look, I denounce all of these things. I believe in the individual. I believe in liberty. I believe in freedom and against bigotry and against hatred. It's just not... It's just horrible the way that they would take this and make it seem much worse than what it is. But I want to go into the nationalism part of this. The nationalism is something that really strikes home for a lot of people. Because a lot of people view nationalism as something that's disgusting, as something that's, filled with racism, with bigotry and everything else. And the only way that is true is if you're a closed border nationalist. When it comes to nationalism itself, it really is an ideology. It's something that you can advocate for. It's just putting your country above the country of others. That is not inherently bad, right? When you are a representative of your country, you want your country to be successful. You don't want another country to be successful. You don't mind if other countries are successful, but you're advocating for your country to be successful. You're advocating to take care of your people within your country. We can talk about bad nationalism. We can talk about good nationalism. Venezuela was a nationalist country. Germany was another bad nationalist country. But even countries that have strong safety nets, such as Sweden. Sweden has nationalist ideologies or policies even, right? They're taking care of the people within their country. Is there a basic definition of nationalism? Yeah, I can pull that one up real quick. All right, so I'll pull that one up for sure. But so nationalism is just basically putting your nation above others, wanting to take care of your nation and to ensure the future of your nation. Nationalism is a post. So this is from the Wikipedia. Nationalism is a political, social, and economic system characterized by the promotion of the interest of a particular nation, especially with the aim of gaining and maintaining sovereignty over the homeland. So you just want to have a sovereign nation. That doesn't mean that, right? Having a sovereign nation doesn't mean that no one is allowed into your nation. That could mean, but it doesn't inherently mean, right? You can be a sovereign nation and vet people to allow people in, right? We have the H-1B visa lottery, or not lottery, but H-1B visa. We have, workers and other forms of immigration that come into the state or into our country. From the American Heritage Dictionary, nationalism is devotion to the interest or culture of one's nation. The belief that nations will benefit from acting independently rather than collectively, emphasizing national rather than international goals. So that one is just the argument of you have globalism and you have nationalism. Nationalism is better because you don't want to have everyone having a say over how the other nations work, right? So me as an individualist, right, I don't even want the states to really have that much say. So I want the federal government to have even less, and I want the global government, should it be enacted in my lifetime, I will certainly be speaking out against that one as well. Nationalism, aspirations for national independence in a country under foreign domination. So the nationalism, that definition, right, that was us in the beginning, getting our sovereignty away from, or becoming sovereign again. You know who else wanted sovereignty? Hitler. He said white nationalism. Yes, he did. And he said white nationalism, and certainly when you read the first one, right, it was horrible. His elaboration later kind of clarified it. He said, look, I'm not a white nationalist. I'm not a white supremacist. I'm a nationalist, and I live in the Western civilization. So that quote again was white nationalist, white supremacist, Western civilization. How did that language become offensive? Why did I sit in classes teaching me about the merits of our history and our civilization? When it comes to what he's talking about with the merits of our history and our civilization, he also said, look, just because you have an egregious view, just because you have something that's reprehensible, just because you're a racist, doesn't mean that I'm in favor of silencing you, disabling your ability to speak out and be free. And going along that notion, right? It really is. It gets down to the idea that you can drown out bad ideas with better ideas. You don't just need to silence it. You just don't have to end them. That's not going to be beneficial in the long run. The implication is that the United States is, at its core, a white country. Wrong focus. I don't think that anyone thinks that America is a white country. And the very small population of people that believe that America is a white country are completely uneducated and really hold no weight to this country in any appreciable way. You'd be hard pressed to find somebody that is actually a white supremacist or a white nationalist in office right now, or being able to actually prove that. They're just such a small, insignificant group of people, and so if we were to become violent against them or to be silencing them, we could certainly be pushing back towards the brown shirts of the Nazism, right? And this is kind of in the beginning of them. This is how they came to be. Was that they were just being oppressed, and they were saying, "Look, we're on the right trail. We're being oppressed because of this." Nationalism and populism have been combined in populist politics. Okay, and certainly populism has... I can't see populism as a good thing, right? Because populism is inherently a democratic thing. When more people have one view, right, and you have a populist person, then you may be seeing somebody move that way, and so it gets into the mob mentality. And just because more people want something doesn't mean that thing is good or better or moral or anything else. Nationalism, we cover that. I'm not a nationalist in any way, but certainly there's no inherent flaw to nationalism or globalism. It's just two poor ideas and the great things, and the articulation of exclusionary nationalism. But when it comes to populism, right? So populism is one of the driving forces behind like Medicare for all right now. Even though there is no constitutional authority, the states never delegated the powers to the federal government to run a healthcare system. You have people that want to subvert the Constitution in another way and make this bigger. That is so true, Scott. And so when you push for something like that, right, it's because of the populist movement. And it's just, no, we were created on a limited government idea. The government was never supposed to be even as big as it is now. And growing it bigger is not going to make it better. It's not going to make it more successful. And it certainly doesn't mean that it'll be providing us goods or services at a cheaper cheaper rate or save us in any appreciable way. And so huge issues there, of course. So populism, I would argue against populism any day of the week. It's not a good view. Principles over populism, principles over party, principles are what should be the driving forces for people. Pardon me. Sorry about that. But yeah. So looking at that entire thing, give the overview of that Steve thing, what we see is another attempt at just omitting information intentionally in order to slander somebody that's on the right side of the aisle. I agree that the quote is poorly worded. He sent out a poor message. His elaboration definitely did clear it up a bit more. But nonetheless, it certainly doesn't need the hubbub that was created from a lot of lefties already saying, look, he needs to be impeached and he needs to be removed right now. It's just, if this is what politics are coming to, then everyone has to be perfect in everything that they say, and they have to be factually and semantically correct. And certainly it's not just about being morally right, but if you mess it up, you got to go, and that would include Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But of course, we want to have standards set differently for which side of the aisle you're on. I think it just really comes down to pure stupidity. It is just pure partisan hatred, and certainly is worthy of being denounced. But let me go through this real quick. So there was I want to go to Tucker Carlson. Who said it? I thought he did. He did say it, but they pulled it out of the context and they omitted the information around it, his elaboration, his explanation. They had omitted that in order to allow the slander to really get hit. And then, even the media after that, right? You couldn't expect CNN or Washington Post or any of them to really give you the full detail, the full story, to make sure that people got the whole thing once it did come out. Instead, what they wanted to do was build it up on partisanship, and that's the fundamental issue there. So Tucker Carlson comes out and we've talked about him before, and we talked about how he wanted to stand in the way of AI or artificial intelligence. He wants to help protect. He's much more in favor of the protectionism of the jobs that we have right now rather than the continued evolution that's been going on, the advancements, the developments that's been going on in this country and really around the world. Dog whistle. I love it when people say dog whistle. How did you hear the dog whistle? How did you hear it, Hunter? Are you racist? Is that how you heard it? Because dog whistles, you can't hear it if you're not a dog. I would never think to say dog whistle, even though I know it's a good buzzword right now. But I'm not sure how you heard it. So if you think it's a dog whistle, then I would like to know really why was it that you heard it and I didn't? Yeah, right, Christ? I agree with you. So if it's a dog whistle, then really... You don't say white nationalism and white supremacy by accident. He was not even trying to say that he was in any way attempting to say that he said them by accident. I would recommend you go actually and read these things and actually go and listen to the words. And then you might be able to pick up on it, because he was saying, look, there's a lot of things out there and you have to look at it. Right. And so one of the things I was referencing earlier, when the New York Times went to the Mises University, when they went there, or the Mises Institute. When they went there, it was a regular whistle. Okay. All right. Good protection there. You didn't say that. You didn't say dog whistle on accident. I know. But nonetheless, when they went there, they had this long discussion with the guy that had 500 peer reviews out there. He has lots of information on libertarianism and everything else. And going through what libertarianism is, going through the non-aggression principle, going through like the values and the society and the way that the structuring goes through and all that, they got to a point where he said, what would slavery be if there was consent? And basically this is where their ears perked up, and this was the story that they ran. And they basically said that he was in favor of slavery with or without consent. And what he was going towards, right, was the fact that everyone has sovereignty of their own body. They have sovereignty of their property, and their property is also their body. And so you don't get to own somebody else, right? You don't get to own somebody. You don't get to tell them what to do. And so you can't enslave somebody. And so he was going down that ideology with the interviewer, and they took it as he was in support of slavery. So just like that, right? Taking things out of context and really spinning it against somebody in order to make them look bad. Certainly, you can hear how somebody would hear a dog whistle and try to call it out. Even though dog whistles, you can't hear them, right? If you guys somehow have been living under a rock and don't know what a dog whistle is, a dog whistle is something that's at such a high frequency that only dogs can hear it. Humans can't hear it, so they'll freak out and whatnot. And when somebody references a dog whistle to politics, it means that they're, if it's a dog whistle to the white supremacists, then, all the white supremacists that are yelling about the dog whistle, they obviously heard it, which is kind of an interesting line of reasoning as to why they're so frantic about it. They're just so tired of hearing those things that they can hear. Stop it. But anyways, back to Tucker Carlson. So Tucker Carlson was against the advancement of AI. He's been this way for a long while. He's been against capitalism in that way because he believes that. In the past, he's spoken about things like automated driving vehicles, right? Automatic vehicles, driverless vehicles, even. And saying, look, if we get rid of those things, then people are going to miss out on their jobs, and that's going to make it worse for everybody. And so he's been against like the McDonald's building in the effective ATMs where you just go and type in your stuff and the food comes out and you don't have to deal with people. He's been against these for a long time. And recently he had a guest on the show that was talking about, they were talking about the advancements within, where was theirs? They were talking about it for, I think theirs was also on cars. And it just comes to this level, and they had mentioned doctors as well. I remember that one being brought up, where we're automating things, and that's causing people to lose jobs. And so obviously we have to save it. We have to stop the growth of this technology, of this development, and prevent it from growing because we have to save the jobs. These are the same exact arguments that were being made during the Industrial Revolution, right? This was the same exact arguments that were being made time and time again throughout our history. That the jobs, as soon as these jobs are gone, there's going to be no new jobs to replace them. There's going to never be a job to replace them. And this is so short-sighted in every way because as more jobs are being taken away, more jobs are being made. We continue to see this trend where even though the population now is much larger than the population of before, we still have enough jobs. The jobs continue to grow. The jobs continue. There continues to be new innovation and development. And so jobs that would have blown the minds of people 100 years ago are flourishing in this day. And so when you argue against the innovations, against the development, what you're saying is I would rather be more inefficient and less effective and have to pay more. And have to pay more in order to get these, to get this service, to get this good, right? Because if you're paying less by having to pay a machine to do something, right? That means that the profit margins are larger, which means that businesses that are going to be doing this, if other businesses get into it, they with having a larger profit margin, then the competition is going to drive those prices down. Now you're getting paid or you're paying less to get a better quality product, right? Machines are much better at building things than what people are. This is why we use machines all the time. And so as this all develops, it becomes more of a viable option. It becomes more of it becomes a better pick in the long run. And so as they become more viable, as it becomes cheaper by the development of these processes, of these programs, of these machines, more companies can pick them on, and then we continue to develop and we continue to grow. So Tucker Carlson taking the stance again against capitalism, against the growth. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Yeah. So, yes, we were talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on, I think it was last Tuesday's show, and we were talking exactly about the Green New Deal, and where she says, look, within a couple decades, we got to be off of fossil fuels and be entirely on green energy. And so her argument is to basically effectively shut down the economy, shut down the GDP growth, shut it all down to be able to figure out how to get off of the the fossil fuels and everything and get put onto renewable energy. And she misses out on even though she has the degree in economics, hasn't picked up on the idea that if the market has not picked it up as a viable pick, it's probably for purposes such as it's too expensive, it's too inefficient, and it's not effective enough in order to be a viable pick. It's not a matter of people are just saying, look, I don't want to I don't want to protect the environment. I would rather waste all of this stuff. That's not the argument. What it is they have overall, right, they want to pick the most viable thing, the cheapest thing. And so that, I've never heard the dog whistle, so that's all you, bro. And so she's advocating against the economy on that grounds, and she misses it entirely. People ousted by artificial intelligence will find new work. Everything balances spontaneously. Yes, everything is in a flux when it comes to the economy. That's why economists are not ever really accurate with their assessments of the futures, because everything is in a flux. Everything is changing, because every day there's a different supply and there's a different demand. You can maintain a steady supply, but the demand will always change, and so it all just fluctuates all around, and so it makes it extremely difficult to project, and so maybe in 30 years, maybe it becomes super viable. Maybe we have some breakthrough in the technology, and we move to that. It's fine if it happens naturally, but if you force it, then what you're doing is you're actually being a detriment to the society that implements it. If you're having to use subsidies to push these things, then what you're doing is you're actually destroying. You're wasting taxpayer money. You're wasting all the funds. The money could be allocated to better things, or not be allocated at all and be put towards the 22 trillion in debt. But there's better ways of doing it than trying to prop up a market that's not ready for the general use. And certainly, right, when we look at even Germany, who implemented basically green energy there across their state or across their country, they said, hey, you guys got to be on green energy. So they got rid of a lot of their fossil fuels. They even got rid of their nuclear plants. They built up a lot of solar panels and wind turbines and everything else. And then because of the nuclear energy, when they lost that, they didn't have enough, so they went back to the fossil fuels. So they at least caught their mistake and went back to the fossil fuels, but now the fossil fuels are worse than what it was before. They really should have just left it on the market and learned from any form of economics and stayed off of it. Whenever you have a central planner trying to push faster than what the market is or allows, you're just going to hurt the people that you're trying to protect. Of course, whenever anyone's trying to utilize the government, it's really difficult to say you're trying to protect somebody. Bought a pipeline of gas from Russia. Yeah. So it's just so frustrating to see people out here advocating for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, advocating for against capitalism, because even if you go and you look at Marxism, right? If you go and look at Karl Marx himself, he even said, like, for the society to thrive under his ideals, right, would take a capitalist nation and build it up, and once it gets to its peak, that's when you can start implementing his policies, right? And so even he understands, he even understands that it takes capitalism to make revenue, to make money, to make this all possible, and then after that, right, you can squander it and destroy it as you see fit. And so the argument should be not how much compassion we can have from a government, but should be when can we stop growing? And certainly we are not at a point right now with the amount of research and development that's been going on in the last 2 decades to say that we're done growing. So we continue to let it grow until it gets to the tippy top, and there's no other possibilities of any research and development making us a better nation. And then we can have a discussion about socialism, communism, Marxism, and everything else. Government sucks really bad at almost everything. You don't need the almost in there. Government sucks really bad at running everything. The conservative principle guiding public health is that uncertainty should be treated as. So I'm not going to speak for conservatives, but if you want to talk about free market ideals, the free market ideals is that you don't own somebody else's service, you don't own someone else's products or goods, and so you don't have that be provided at no cost to you. So that's the idea against like a Medicare for all. In principle, it also is against the Constitution, right? There's no constitutional amendment clause or anything that enables the government to be regulating or controlling our healthcare in any way. We can also look at the fact that the U.S. healthcare, our research and development is what helps drive the rest of the healthcare around the world. So a lot of our research and development is taken from here and it's spread over to these nations that have this. Whenever you have a government ran research and development, you may have some breakthroughs, you may have some innovations, but if you have a competition, if you actually have free market competition, then you have a bunch of different entities trying to outcompete the other ones. And they will have many more innovations over the same period of time and provide that growth. So if you're a globalist, right, you should still want us to be a free market, private research and development at a minimum. And if you want to implement like a Medicare for all, do it on the state level. Don't do it. Don't put everyone. Don't put the entire nation under the control of the federal government. If you trust your government to run these things, run it at your state level. If you can't trust your state level to do it, then don't put it towards the other 49 people. I exist, therefore I'm entitled. That is the degree of a lot of people's arguments. I exist, therefore give it to me. Nobody argues against capitalism. No. Everyone. I've seen a lot of people. I'm in plenty of groups that people argue against capitalism in every way. They call it immoral. They call it disgusting. They call it failure. They try to label things post-capitalism, and yada yada yada. Yeah. So certainly there's a huge issue on those things. Okay, privatize the military. I'm down. All right, if you really want me, so I'm a minarchist. I'm not sure if you've ever heard what that term is, but I'm a minarchist I'm basically an anarchist on 90% of the government. There's only a small few select things in which I believe that the government can run, and it's basically the judicial system. The judicial system is all that I can look at and say, yeah, you know what, maybe I do want to have a central power on that. And that would be for federal level, and that would be to basically protect the sovereignty of the individual, protect the sovereignty of their property, and their property includes their person. That's it, right? That's it. If we want to have a collective military, we can have one, but that doesn't mean that it should be there. And it's also interesting that you went from the entire scope of what the entire government is, and you went straight down to the military. I'm surprised you didn't go with my roads. I'm really genuinely surprised you didn't go to my roads, which is always the other fun one, because both of those is it's like 18% of the entire budget, despite the fact that there's a lot of left-wing people out there that say, you know, the military is way over budget and way over spending, despite the fact that historically it's on the lower end of what the total budget is by percentage. So you get to learn some things about me tonight. That's fine. But yeah. So trying to remember where we left off on. Anyways, I think I'm just gonna wrap it up from there. I hope you guys enjoyed tonight. I realize no one's been joining in and everything else. Everyone knows the roads can't exist without government building them. Yes, I know that's a completely satirical comment. Nonetheless, Australia's got private roads. And my roads. But nonetheless, guys, I appreciate you guys for joining in tonight. Next time I'll see you guys will be Tuesday night. I think I'm going to be running a little bit late. I'm going to be hopping on the Chris Mack show, so you guys will be seeing me hopping on there. But nonetheless, as soon as we're done recording that show, I will be coming live to you guys later on that night. Should be probably around 7:30. So I'm excited to see you guys there. Hope you guys all enjoyed your weekend. I am Mr. Merca, the Bearded Truth, Jason Lyon, Aspen. I hope you go back and watch the replay. It was kind of fun. So Hunter, okay, hold on. Hunter's showing his tolerance again. We'd be living in a violent world with shortened lifespans. I wish we could simulate that for you. He would wish ill upon another because he disagrees on principle. How tolerant, how loving, how acceptable it is to be absolutely 100% a disgusting individual that would wish ill upon another, just in order to simulate something. you can feel free to find the X button on there if you would like. As for the idea that it would be a violent world, it really wasn't that violent. If you want to look at violent crimes have been growing. There's been a lot. When there was less gun control, there's less gun laws and everything else in the beginning of our nation. There was a lot less violence that was happening amongst people outside of consensual things such as duels and whatnot. And so on those grounds, right, it wasn't that much more violent then. So we can destroy that. Shortened lifespans. If you want to talk about shortened lifespans, how about we go and we look at the Medicare for All system? We can actually see where lifespans have been shortened by those. We can see where people in Canada and whatnot, because of the 17 weeks in between being diagnosed and being told to go see a surgeon or a specialist, that people's quality of life has gone down because they have to get arms, legs amputated, have died while waiting, and everything else. And so, if you want to talk about a shortened lifespan, I really wouldn't say that the quality of life is better when you have something like Medicare for All and everything else. Okay, my bad. I'm sorry that I went off the deep end on that. I apologize for that. As somebody who's called me a white supremacist in here, despite the fact that I don't find race to have any inherent value whatsoever. You're a doctor, not true. You're a doctor, not true. So please tell me about Canada. Please tell me all about Canada. Do you want me to pull up the studies for you? Do you want to go to UK? Do you want to go to Finland? Do you want to go to Sweden? Which country do you want to go to? Hunter would hate James R's Pirate Radio Friday nights 11. Yeah, right? Medicare for All would see decisions to end for lives for practical reasons. Absolutely agree. So you don't want to go to any of those. Okay. So being a doctor. Here's the fun thing. Here's the beautiful thing, right? I've had lawyers in here that wanted to argue with me about the idea of what the Constitution, what the scope is, and everything else. They wanted to argue with me over plain text that was written for the layman's or for the common citizen to be able to read and understand. So just because you're in a role does not mean that you have empirical data, that you've actually done any research, or have add any value to any of this. I said you were defining the white supremacist. So you're accusing him of being a white supremacist for what he said, and then you also said that it was a dog whistle. So once again, right, you're really standing on these weak arguments in the grand scheme of things. And I wish I could scroll through. Actually, let me see if I can, actually. Oh, so you just said I was defending white supremacy as a general, which I've never defended white supremacy. I don't defend white supremacy. You see patience. So you see patience. So what does that give you on the grounds of being able to have a discussion about Medicare for All? So I worked in the military. Should I be able to tell people exactly how everything works and how everything is structured? No, right? The appeal to authority on that one by saying, look, I'm a doctor, I obviously know about these things. It doesn't work. Don't talk about me, talk about the substance. Well, I mean, you've had a pretty angry rhetoric for most of this. Quite unbecoming, if you will. But it is what it is. Nonetheless, I'm going to head out, guys. I will see you guys Tuesday night, probably around 7:30. Keep your ears out for the Chris Mack Files. I will be going on there as well. That's what the recording for Tuesday night is going to be about. That's why we'll be running a little bit late. But hope you guys all have a great night. Enjoyed your weekend. I'll see you guys soon. I am Mr. Merca, the Bearded Truth, Jason Lyon.